Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Katie, I'm a full-time artist, and last August I started a daily art challenge where I draw 6 days a week for 1 whole year. So I post these over on Instagram each day except for Saturdays, and I also do a bi-weekly roundup here on YouTube just to talk through the artwork and what I've been feeling and how I'm finding the challenge so far. Today I'm going to be recapping weeks 40 and 41, which is mostly sketchbook work and one larger piece, so I'm just going to get straight into it. Day 234 is in my A4 Royal Challenge sketchbook. These are the sketchbooks I tend to use all the time, but usually I reach for my A5 one rather than the A4. But for this one I did want to work a little bigger than usual, and this time I just did some boats which I haven't drawn before. And this isn't painted at all, this is all done with Ecoline brush pens, some Neocolors and coloured pencils for all the details, but I'm really pleased with how this turned out. Obviously it's a subject which I haven't drawn much of, and I don't tend to draw boats at all, so it was really nice to just focus on them, and I got sent some Ecoline brush pens, so it was the perfect chance to try out some of the brighter colours. Obviously I usually draw landscapes and natural things, so I don't tend to use like bright blues or reds in my work, so I thought this would be the perfect exercise, and I definitely enjoyed adding on all of the details onto the boats, and it was actually a really quick spread. My favourite on this spread is the little blue one with the pink accents in the corner, but I definitely want to try and do more of these. I really like the idea of filling a spread with like one subject and just doing lots of variety of them. So if you have any suggestions for other things I can paint in this way, then please do pop them in the comments. Day 235 was also in my A4 tan sketchbook, but this time I did go back to my nature comfort zone and I painted these owls. So this was referenced from the Biodiversity Heritage Library, which has a Flickr with loads of copyright-free images, and these owls really caught my eye. When I was drawing these, I was planning on keeping the background blank and just having the owls as like the main focus, and I wasn't sure when I was painting it in whether the background was a good choice or not. It's definitely not my usual like muted colours. I went with like quite a neon green with the blue and then the green at the bottom. So it did feel out of my comfort zone, but overall, like after I'd taken a step back and came back to the piece, I really am pleased with how it turned out. I think it really adds like a nostalgic sort of antique-y vintage feel to the spread, and I'm really pleased with it. I really like the colours of the owls. I think the orange one especially works better than the one on the right. I think I overworked him a little bit, but I think it's really nice. On the camera it does look a bit odd. The contrast is playing around a little bit, and this isn't actually as dark as it's showing up, so it's not quite as like contrasted in real life. But I'm really pleased with it, and it didn't actually do very well on Instagram, which I was surprised at, but I do find some of my like bird pieces never do. But I really enjoyed this one, and I always enjoy painting animals, and this was just a really nice relaxing one to paint. So that's it for the A4 sketchbook in these 2 weeks. And for day 236, I actually went into my very small Royal Challenge sketchbook, which is 12 by 12 centimetres, and just did these acrylic studies of Barcelona. These were extremely quick and very basic, and actually did better than the owls. I always find that the work I spend more time on actually receives the least likes, which I always find quite interesting. But I was really pleased with the mark making in these ones. I was using quite a thick brush, and I was using acrylic, which I don't often use, but I am trying to use it more because I'm trying to push out of my comfort zone with gouache, and I think this was really successful in terms of practicing with the medium. I used quite a thick flat-headed brush, which meant I could do some of these shapes, like especially this curvy bush in the front. And I actually kept it quite light on the details, which I don't often do. Usually I'll do like a base layer and then I'll go ham on the details. Whereas for this one I kept it really simple and just added a few marks onto the buildings and added some lines in the sky for the clouds. And when I first did this, I thought it was just a spread which I wouldn't actually share on Instagram, but I do think it was really helpful for me to practice with acrylics and also show some of my mark making, and I think I can apply this onto my bigger paintings when I do them as well, so it was still a really useful exercise. On day 237, I actually filmed my most recent vlog, which was uploaded last Sunday. And you'll know if you watch that one that I did my daily art and I did film it. I was planning on editing a reel for this one and having the footage of the process of this one in that vlog, but I still can't find that footage, so it's completely gone. So sadly, I did lose all of the process for that one, but I was really pleased with how this turned out, which I think is why I was a little bit more gutted about losing it. And this was a narrative panel piece, which if you've seen my other daily art videos, you'll know I've done a few of these lately. And this one I didn't actually write a story for, but it is based on like a selection of images which I chose with a narrative in mind. So for each of these I took 10 minutes per panel and I used like very similar colours to try and link them all together. Obviously I had it set in the woods, so I started with this bigger one, and this is probably my least favourite panel. I think it doesn't work very well because of the size. Obviously I only had 10 minutes, so I think with the 10-minute timers it definitely is more successful when I do the smaller panels, just because I can add more details. So I'm definitely happier with the left-hand side of the spread more than the right, but I also know that's personal preference because I did have some comments saying they preferred the left, and that's always really interesting, and I really value that feedback because it helps me see things in a different light. I probably won't write a story for this one and just keep it as it is, but definitely something that was a good practice for my narrative pieces, and I still want to keep going on that and really explore narrative in my work. Day 238 was another big painting, and this is on a A3 piece of canvas paper. So it's really thin, and I taped this onto the wall and used it like I did in my previous big pieces and painted it with it on the wall. So this was kind of inspired by the smaller Barcelona ones because I really was focusing again on mark making here. You can see I kept things quite basic, although there's definitely a lot more details on this one, and I'm really pleased with it. It's not my most favourite big painting I've done, but I really like the colours and the warmth that come through, and obviously orange and peachy paints work really nicely with the blue, so I'm pleased with that and how that turned out. And then I also really like the movement in the water. Because it is canvas paper, I couldn't add many details on with coloured pencils, which is why it's a lot blockier, and I had to rely less on the details for this one. But I did add on some highlights with Neocolor pastels, and I think that works nicely. I did have some comments about making this one into a print, which I'm still debating, but this was really useful. I've obviously been painting a lot bigger recently, and it's really good practice for my bigger paintings that I want to do for my exhibition. So really pleased with this one, and I definitely feel like I take some learnings from each big piece I do, so the more I do, then hopefully the better I get. Day 239 was a day where I worked in tandem, so I worked in both my A5 and my A4 sketchbook. So I thought that the owls was the last time I worked in this one, but I'd totally forgotten that I'd also done this Devon painting. This goes alongside this A5 one. And I've worked like this a few times before, where I work on one painting at the same time as another. So instead of like working on one completely and then moving on to the next, I try and work with them at the same time, and I take learnings from one to apply to the other. So these ones are actually quite similar, but obviously you'll see on the bigger one I did put a tree on the right. Usually I prefer these smaller ones whenever I work like this, but I actually prefer the bigger one this time. I think the tree really frames it nicely, and I didn't quite leave enough room on the smaller one to add that in, but I think it works better with it and it kind of adds more life to the piece. One of the things I did on the smaller one that I didn't on the big one was add in all my like wave lines that I add onto water, which I still really like, and it definitely needed it because it does still feel like something's missing, and I think having the tree in this one would have helped that. On both of them I've still got the houses in the background, and I can add a bit more detail on the larger one because there's more space, but I've kept things very similar in terms of adding on all the squibbly details and adding on the pink highlights, which I like to do with my landscapes. So I really recommend working on two pieces at the same time and like in two sketchbooks. It really makes you think about what you're doing and whether you want to apply it to your next painting. So instead of like waiting to the next day to do your next painting, it's more of a quicker process, and I feel like you learn a lot faster. So to kick off week 41 and day 240, I went back to my A5 Talon sketchbook and did another panel page. And this one I filmed for my Patreon video for May, and it was a real-time video where they can see me panic and create all of these panels in 5 minutes. I should specify 5 minutes each, not 5 minutes for the whole thing. And as before, like I said about the 10-minute one, it definitely works better on these smaller panels, because I think the bigger ones, it's just not enough time to get the level of detail I want. You can definitely see I've warmed up a little bit on some of the panels where I'm getting a little bit more comfortable with the timer, and I definitely prefer like the bottom half spreads compared to the top two. I also am really pleased with the colours on this one. So this was a limited colour spread, and I've added the swatches over there on the right hand page. But this was done and inspired by the haul I did from Jackson's Art, so I bought some new Luminance coloured pencils, and I used that colour palette that I bought those coloured pencils in as the base for this. And I really love the pink. I think it pairs really nicely with that lime green and also that warmer shade of blue. So if you want to see more of the pencils I did buy and me swatching them, then that will be in the vlog, which I'll link up in the cards. So this was actually a really quick spread, and I used MapCrunch to find this view, which is in Sweden, and I just went down the road and drew the different houses that I found. And like I said, if you want to see my process for that, then that's available on my Patreon. Day 241 is again in my A5 Talon sketchbook, and it's very different for me, and I'm actually really pleased with it. So it's obviously a lot more vibrant and bold, and using a colour palette I very rarely use. This was inspired by a storm which we had on the Sunday night, and I find that really interesting of like using things in your daily life to inspire your art, and I can really see in this one because obviously I painted a storm. And I try to use colours which I wouldn't normally, so I very rarely touch my purple shades of gouache. So I was really keen on doing that, and it's why I left like the horizon line quite low so I could really put emphasis on the sky. And it really helps to keep things quite simple down here because there is so much texture and energy going on in the sky. And I achieved that by like using lots of really scribbly marks. You can see I was very loose with my brush, I wasn't blending anything, and then I went over the top with coloured pencils and Neocolours just to add more of those scribbly marks. And then the bottom half is very yellow, which again I don't often use. I often go for the green fields, but I think this works really nicely and it pairs really nicely with the purple. Obviously they're complementary colours, which I think is why I like this spread so much. I like some of the details in the farm buildings down here, and this just made me feel really confident, and when you try something new and it goes how you want in your head, I just think it gives you that extra confidence in creativity, and it really spurred me on to create more in this way for the rest of the week. So for day 242, I was using that like creative confidence I had to try something new again, and this was the first time I tried the Room Portrait Club, which is an account on Instagram where each week they share a different room and then you can paint it in any medium you like and then share it on their hashtag. So that's what I did on the right of this spread. This was the image by Room Portrait Club that I copied, and then this one is actually just a picture I found on a copyright-free site. So both of these are out of my comfort zone. This one is because it's got a figure in it, and obviously I very rarely draw a close-up of a house, and obviously I never do an interior shot either. So these really pushed me out of my comfort zone, and I'm actually really pleased with the spread. I really like how the colours look together, and I think it really complements it. It's almost as if this is in this house, even though they're obviously completely different images. I did keep it quite sparse on the details, especially on the outside one, but I think there's a lot of details on the interior one which I feel like makes it more interesting to me. The parts that I like the most are the like paintings on the wall and like the little bird statue and things. And over here I really like the pops of orange against that green. So although this is very different for me, it still feels like it's my style. I still did it in the same sort of process I normally do with the gouache layer and then going on top with my details. So it definitely still helped with my confidence creatively to know that I can apply those skills that I feel quite confident in with landscapes into other subjects. So this is very different for me, but I was really pleased with how it turned out. So following on from that creative high and my stormy piece from the couple of days before, I did another stormy piece in my sketchbook, and this one started off very wobbly. I really wasn't pleased with how it was going, so I kind of threw everything at this one, and you can definitely tell it's extremely messy, very chaotic, but it definitely works with the sky that I've added in. So you can see I've done another stormy sky here and added a lot of texture, but because the horizon is so much higher, there's a lot more going on in the foreground as well compared to the purple and yellow spread I did. So I feel like it has a lot more energy, and at first I thought it had too much. Like, either it was too bold, there was too much contrast, and I wasn't sure, but it's really grown on me the more I look at it. And like, the sky is, you can tell it's really inspired by that first storm, but I've gone even more extreme than the first one. And you can see that follows through down here in the front with all the scribbly lines. Oh, this has moved. This is supposed to be over there, this tiny little flower. This little tiny flower has come off, but you can see I've added collage down here, so I need to stick that back on. But that really helps. I think that really adds a bit more colour and interest down here and ties in the pink detail, so I'm really pleased I added those, and they were just cut from my paint palette sheet. So there are some details on this that I think can get lost, especially in photos, like the sheep over here, and there are also my signature little lines on the water. And I'm really pleased with this one. It's definitely a bit more chaotic than I normally would do, but really good to push myself like that. And yeah, the more I look at this, the more I like it. So day 244, again in my A5 talons, and this time the complete opposite to any of the stormy, chaotic paintings that I've previously done, and I went really calm and peaceful for this scene. So this is another image which I found on the copyright-free image website, and it's very autumnal. The colours in the trees is what really drew me to the picture in the first place, and I really love how the muted tones turned out. To create the white buildings, I actually mapped that in like negative space, so I painted all the trees around it and just blocked out the shapes, and I didn't sketch first at all. I just used the paint to draw around where I thought the buildings should be. And then I went over the top with my usual Neocolours and pencils, and I used quite subtle greys for a lot of the building details, and I found this one really hard to photograph because obviously this is so bold and the details here kind of got a little bit lost. But I'm actually really pleased with the feeling of this one. I feel like the peaceful vibes really come through, especially in contrast to like the stormy ones. So this one was actually a really quick one, and I was surprised by how well it did on both Twitter and Instagram, but I really like the vibes of this one, and I think that's probably why it resonated with other people, just because the colours are really nice and it just feels like a really warm spread. Okay, so day 245 is the very last one for week 41, and I went back to my comfort zone and just did another panel spread. So again, these were done on Google Maps, and I just did a random pin drop in the Netherlands and then drew the 4 panels and painted the houses that I found. So this was in the area of Friesland. I'm not sure how you pronounce that, but again, I did the limited colour palette, and I really love this one. I've done a lot of these, so it's very much in my comfort zone, but I'm really pleased with how it turned out. You can see I'm very confident with my marks, and I think that's something that I've taken from the Daily Art Challenge. When I look at some of my pieces from way back last year in August, I feel like you can really see my confidence growing, and especially in my mark making, you can really see that come through. So not much to say about this one, apart from that I really like the colours, and obviously I really enjoy doing these panel spreads, and I think that always comes through. And these are always really nicely received as well. And it's nice to be able to do something that doesn't necessarily need a lot of thinking work. I'd obviously tried a lot of new things that week, so it was nice to just fall back onto something that I know I can do easily, and it was a really nice way to round off the week. So that rounds up weeks 40 and 41 of the Daily Art Project. And as always at the end of these videos, I always ask what your favourite piece has been. For me, out of those 2 weeks, I think it would be this one, simply because it was so different for me, but I also think it was really successful, and I feel like doing this really unlocked some other ideas for me, and you can see that in some of the paintings I did after this. But I so often just paint blue skies, so just changing this and doing the storm really felt like I could do a lot more with my art, and that was a really nice feeling. So I'd love to hear your favourite down in the comments, and I really appreciate you watching these videos and following me over on Instagram as well. We just hit 10,000 followers on Instagram, which is incredible, and I definitely wouldn't have achieved that if it wasn't for this daily art project, and I'm sure I'll do some more reflections and a roundup at the end, which should be in around August. You can follow me over on Instagram to see each piece every day, or you can watch the recaps every couple of weeks here on YouTube, and I know a lot of you do both, and I really appreciate your support. I'll see you next week with another YouTube video, and I hope you have a lovely week. See you later.